Welcome to the Macdownunder Podcast for all Australian Apple computer enthusiasts and collectors.
Welcome to episode 46 of the Macdownunder Podcast. I'm Justin, and thanks for joining me for today's episode. Last week, we covered my family's first ever computer, an Apple II Euro Plus. So this week, I'm going to cover my second, the one I bought from Myers, Melbourne store while it was on sale back in 1987, the Apple IIc. We'll also cover our regular collecting news, coming events, and for sale items. So, on to today's episode. The Apple IIc, was it really portable? Well, when you look at all the things on the desk here, in fact, I need a bigger desk, you might be inclined to say no, but listen to the story and we'll just find out. So as I mentioned in the last episode, I got my first computer, the Apple II Euro Plus, in 1981 when I was in year 10. I continued to use it right through my school and my uni courses. And in 1987, I was undertaking an honours by thesis and was being hosted by an inner city hospital in Melbourne. At the time, the hospital in the research lab had a single IBM compatible, I think it was a 286, for the whole lab. And of course, all my files were on DOS 3.3 using the Zardax word processor format. So completely incompatible with what they were doing at the hospital. So I needed an Apple II computer that I could take to the lab so I could work on my thesis document whilst waiting for my experiments to complete. The Apple IIc, now the C was for compact, was released in 1984, just after the original Macintosh. So I knew about it, but I didn't have a need for it, and they were really quite expensive at the time. So it was 1987 and I was walking through the Melbourne CBD at lunchtime, and Myers was having a sale and they had Apple IIcs reduced to $600. But by the time you added in a monitor 2C and a PAL encoder and RF modulator, it come to $1,186. And in fact, I've got the original receipt here. Remember the original Myers receipts? Quite fascinating. So $1,186.85, that's around $3,700 in today's money. Doesn't make it sound very cheap, but it was at the time. I also purchased a rectangular leather carry case to take the computer and the monitor to and from home and to the hospital. And as I mentioned, I used the Zardax word processor produced right here in Australia to write my thesis, and I wrote my own graphics programs to plot the various graphs and charts that I needed. It worked, and I got a first class honours. Yay me. So for me at least, the Apple IIc was absolutely portable. I carried it to and from uni every day for most of a year. And as you'll see in a moment, there were other developments, even more recent developments, that have made it even easier to be portable. Now, my Apple II Euro Plus was eventually replaced by an Apple II GS in 1988. And despite the huge speed jump that the Apple II GS gave me, I was clearly using my Apple IIc because in 1989, I paid $305 to have the motherboard replaced because it had failed. So let's talk about the Apple IIc. So it's Snow White design language from Frog Design in the fog colour. So it was the only suite of products to come in this off-white fog colour. It came with a carry handle on the back, and it had a 1.4 megahertz 65C02 8-bit processor. It was faster than my Apple II Euro Plus. It was nowhere near as fast as the 2GS, but it was on a par with the Apple IIe. And because it had the 65C02 processor, it came with extra instructions, but it was very fussy. It was a CMOS processor, and it didn't allow illegal 6502 commands that the earlier Apple IIs would. So some of the Apple II software wasn't compatible with it. It came with 128K of RAM, double what my old Europlus had, an 80-column card built in, and a switch on the front that allowed you to switch from 40 and 80 columns. It came with a keyboard switch as well. Now, I just played with this one before filming, and it changes the keyboard layout completely. I'm not entirely sure. It's not a Dvorak. I'm not really sure what keyboard layout it's got, but it's certainly not one I'm familiar with. It came with two built-in super serial ports, with two DIN-style serial ports, one for a modem, and you can see I've got the Apple modem there, and one for a printer, and we had printer choices as well. The mouse card was built in with a DE9 port for either a mouse, a joystick, or numeric keypad. Well, I've got the mouse plugged in today, but of course you could have a joystick if you wanted. It had a floppy controller built in. Now, this used the integrated WAS machine, so it was smart port capable eventually. It included an internal slimline 5¼ inch floppy drive, 140 kilobyte capacity, and it had a external floppy port that eventually became a smart port. In terms of video, it had composite video out for connecting to a monitor, either the Apple Color Monitor 2C or the Monochrome Monitor 2C, which is a green and white machine. It also had a video port with a DB15 connector. Now, it's not an RGB connector, but it can be used for things like the LCD panel or modules, as we'll find out later on. It also came with mono audio out connected to the internal speaker with a 3.5mm connector, and it also came with a volume control, one of the I think the only Apple II really to have an external volume control. And the ROM3 motherboards, which were a complete revamp of the circuit board, also came with a 34-pin memory expansion connector to allow you to add up to 1 megabyte of RAM. It has an external 15-volt power supply, the brick. It weighs in at 3.4 kilograms, so it's not super heavy, not all that light either. And in terms of the machines, there were 4 ROM versions. Now, as it turns out, the Apple IIc that I've got on my collection here must be my original one because it's in the best physical condition. But unfortunately, I think it's got a RAM failure, so I can't actually operate it. So for today's demos, I've got a newer machine. Now, the way that you can tell which ROM version you've got is to turn the machine on, get into the prompt, and print peak bracket 64447 bracket. And if it comes up with a 255, you've got the first model, which had one external 5.25 floppy drive only. It wasn't a smart port at this point. It had no self-test mode, and it had a couple of issues with its serial ports. If that print peak comes back with a 0, then that means it's smart port enabled. That was the second version, which allowed you to use the 800K 3.5 inch Unidisc. And you could even daisy chain the 5¼ inch external floppy drive. In fact, if you tried prompting slot 7, PR#7, it would come up saying that Apple Talk was enabled, but in fact, that was just a label and there was no underpinning Apple Talk, sadly. Then there's ROM3. This was the one with a new motherboard and had the RAM expansion in it. It also came with a new keyboard design, which is grey. And what you might notice if you're really quick is that this one has a grey keyboard compared to this one that has the fog keyboard. So no surprises here, this is a ROM3 model. There was a ROM4, I haven't got one of those at the moment, and it had some bug fixes. And as we'll find out later, you can upgrade to ROM4 pretty easily. So to my collection. So I've got the Apple IIc. In this case, it's a ROM3 version. I've got the Monitor 2C and its stand, which is very important. Otherwise, it just sits on the ground and potentially gets damaged. I've also got the Color Monitor 2C in that same fog. There was a platinum version for a later model of the Apple IIc, but this is in the fog, and it also comes with the stand that makes it sit above the Apple IIc. Now, the rare item that I've got on display here is the Apple IIc LCD monitor. Now, it is 80 columns and 24 lines, but it is not backlit. And I'll turn it on in a moment and you'll see, or rather not see, how good it is. So it needs direct light and it needs contrast. And its contrast variability isn't very good. So over here I've got the mouse 2C that plugs straight in. So this is the actual labelled mouse 2C. I've got the disk 2C at the bottom here, the 5¼ inch floppy drive, and I've got a Unidisc 3.5 inch floppy drive. I've got the Apple modem in fog. Now you might remember when we talked about modems in the networking edition, there was both the fog and the beige to match the original Macintosh. But this is in fog with the coloured Apple logo, just like all the other accessories for the Apple IIc. Now, the first ImageWriter 2 came in fog, and you can see that this is in fog. It's got the coloured Apple logo, but it doesn't say ImageWriter 2. So this is the Apple IIc compatible version. Not that it's not compatible with anything else, but it was specifically designed in this colour to match the Apple IIc. And at the front, I've got the Scribe printer. Now, I've had to take its stand off just so that it fits on the table and didn't block any views. But the Scribe printer, now this is a wax transfer thermal printer. So it's colour, as is the ImageWriter 2, but it's a wax transfer printer, but specifically for the Apple IIc. All right, so let's have a look at this Apple II. We'll pop around the front and we'll turn her on. And we'll just stop for a moment and we'll just do the print peek. And if you're lucky, you'll see that there's a 3 there. So there you go, it's a ROM 3. So let's reboot. So no surprises here that I've got ProDOS being loaded through the internal 5¼ inch drive, and this is going to come up with mouse paint. Now, believe it or not, there is text on this screen, and I'll put some photos in to show you, but there is text on this screen. In fact, I'll put a photo showing the lighting setup that I used for the photo, and you'll see how much light I needed to get a really faint image for the camera. All right, let's move forward. We'll click the mouse button and move into mouse paint. So of course, mouse paint on the green screen is obviously monochrome, but it does show up on the LCD screen. And again, I'll put a picture that I've taken of that screen that you might be able to see a bit more clearly. So there you go, there's mouse paint in monochrome. Just to demonstrate that this system is working, we'll unplug the monochrome screen because I've only got one composite out, and we'll plug in the colour screen. Oh, that doesn't look very good on the TV, does it? But you can see there we've got the colour and we've got the colour mouse paint screen. Doesn't show up on the video very well, and you'll notice that this machine needs a recap as well because it's got the wandering vertical hold, which just means that there's a capacitor to be replaced. All right. Now let's see if we can get the 3.5 inch disk drive working. So what we'll do is we'll turn it off, we'll turn it back on and get to the prompt, and now we'll go PR#5 and we'll see what's in the 3.5 inch disk drive. So ProDOS 8 and system utilities. So as you can see, the internal 5¼ inch floppy drive works, the external smart port 3.5-inch uni drive works. Let's see about the external drive here. So this is clearly a ProDOS 8 system disk, version 3.1 as it turns out. So whilst we're waiting for that to load, we should be able to catalogue whatever is in, because we can't boot from the second floppy drive easily. So what we'll do is have a look at what's in there. So we'll go slot and drive. It's in slot 6 and it's drive 2. We'll hit enter. So it's a DOS 3.3 disk, and I don't know if you can see, but in that directory listing, it's clearly my Zardax word processor from 1987. In fact, it's copyright 1985 by Computer Solutions Australia. So there you go. The back to the original Zardax that I just love. All right, let's reboot that back into MouseWorks. There you go. All right, so as I mentioned, on the back of the computer, there's a composite out port. Now, when you're in America, what you end up getting is one of these adapters that allows you to, which is an RF modulator basically, and allows you to connect to your TV. And you had a choice of a couple of channels. If you did that, you also needed this switch box, which is Apple branded, which allowed you to switch between the computer on your TV and the aerial going into the TV. So you could switch between computer and your roof-mounted aerial. Doesn't matter these days, of course. In Australia, you needed this much bigger adapter. Now this plugs in, like the others do, into the 15-pin port on the back of the Apple IIc. So you can't use this and the LCD screen because it operates the same 15-pin port. And this gives you composite out, but also an RF modulated out. And in fact, there's an adjustment to change the channel. So these were generally sold with the computer, and in fact, this one came with mine. And then you've got the 15-pin port for the LCD itself. And I've got to say, when you've got everything connected up, it gets really busy. I'll show you a photo, and I haven't even got the serial ports connected, and it's still really busy back there with all the cables. So Apple IIcs became quite a fan favourite, and there's lots of options. There's real-time clocks. There's third-party memory cards to get up in the ROM 3s, up to that 1.128 megabytes of RAM. Seaview made an LCD monitor not unlike this one. It had the same problems as well. Applied Engineering made the Z-RAM, which was not only a memory expansion card, but came with a Z80 processor for running CP/M. Prairie Power Portable Systems made an external battery to make it truly portable. I haven't got one of those, sadly. And there were accelerators. So Zip Chip and Rocket Chip made accelerators that could take your Apple IIc up to 10 megahertz. So faster, in fact, than the Apple IIgs. ProApp and Chinook both made smart port-based hard disk drives. Now, I don't have those either, but there's a modern alternative I'll get to in a moment. C-Drive made an internal hard drive that connected to the motherboard for faster access. And you could also get sound cards. So Mockingbird D, Cricket and Echo 2C were all products that you could get for sound out of your, better sound out of your Apple IIc. Now, there are recent options as well, and I'm really impressed. Dylan and others, friends of the show, have got really hot-rodded Apple IIcs. So you can get USB-C power adapters today for your Apple IIc, so you don't need the big brick. There are ROM upgrades available from a range of sources that get you up to ROM 4 if that's what you want to do. It doesn't change the motherboard though, it's just the firmware. There's the ROM X for the IIc, which has got a clock as well as a programmable ROM that you can program through the Apple IIc. And it's got Australian import, so there's a product to support. And of course, with those ROMs, you can have ProDOS, you can have DOS 3.3, and a suite of programs inside the computer to boot very fast. There's also now the xDrive 2C mass storage device, again with the same Australian input. And this allows you to have up to 8 USB images, disk images, available inside your Apple IIc. And in fact, it's got a USB port as well, and a nifty little adapter that connects on the side of your Apple IIc. There's the floppy EMU or the W drives that plug into the smart port and emulate an external floppy drive, so you can use that to load any sort of disk image as well. There are no slot clocks, they've been around for a while. If you want a network, there's FujiNet. There's even a Bluetooth game port adapter. Now, in terms of video, we're pretty limited in this hardware, particularly the LCD, but there are also now HDMI and VGA adapters that plug straight into that 15-pin port on the back of the Apple IIc. In fact, some people have even 3D printed their own colour LCD screen to replace the Apple one, but with a portable colour LCD screen. And there's also case replacements. So you can get clear or black from a couple of suppliers, at least one supplier, and replacement keyboards that match. So just about the whole Apple IIc can be replaced. Perhaps the motherboard is the only thing that remains consistent. So, do you have an Apple IIc in your collection? Do you still use it? What sorts of options have you put on it? If you've got one, I'm sure you've modded it. My mods were to get all the hardware, but I probably will grab some of those more modern mods as well. What's your ultimate Apple IIc setup? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. So on to recent news. And user Jimmy422 on the 68K Macintosh Liberation Army forums has a post about cloning and modernising the TAM. We've heard about Jimmy's work previously, but he's now posted a suite of things that he's done, 3D prints and options for alternative internals for a modern version TAM. Have a look at the link in the description if you're interested, but it looks fantastic. Next up, user Adam on the Vintage Apple Reddit has announced a Lisa emulator operating under Rust on the web. The machine that thought it was 1983 again is the title. Link down in the description. I've had a little play. It works really well. It emulates the Lisa 7.7 operating system, or the Office system in particular. Haven't gone much further than that, but it looks really good, so give it a try. And this has been posted in a whole lot of groups, but I saw this on the Lisa group on Facebook. David Grealish, who put together the documentary on the Lisa, has recorded an interview with Alex Anderson McLeod, who developed the Lisa 1 FPGA project that we spoke about in a recent episode. Fantastic interview to hear from Alex and how he went about building a modern day Lisa using the FPGA technology. Take a look. On to coming events and technology markets. Still no new dates advertised as yet, so watch their Facebook page for any updates. Link in the description. WasFest have their next meeting on the 25th of July 2026. In a family home, you can access it on the web, but contacted the organisers to get further details. Retro Gaming Bendigo have their next meeting on Saturday the 11th of July at 12 o'clock for 12:30 start at the Huntley Memorial Hall. Link down in the description. The Mac Museum. Well, last week they updated the venue and the layout. This week they've updated their website, so take a look at the website. Their next open day is Saturday the 11th of July from 10 a.m. to till 2 p.m. And there's a new membership scheme that's been launched, so check the website for details. There are some costs involved, but they're not too much, so it should be easy to get down there and avail yourself of the Mac Museum. The Adelaide Retro Computing Group have their next meeting on Friday the 10th of July 2026, 5:30 till 10:30 p.m. in the Unley Community Centre in South Australia. Now, if you have a retro computing event, particularly an Apple-related one, please reach out and let me know, and I'd be happy to include it in this list. Okay, on to this week's for sale items. Now, it came to my attention that my eBay account's a bit wonky, and so the prices that are showing up for me are a little bit off. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it's only within $1 or so. So hopefully these listings that I'm about to read out aren't too far off. Now, this week I've focused on Apple IIc things for obvious reasons. And first up, we have the Monitor 2C. Now, this is the monitor only, no stand, but it does appear to be working. This one's in Victoria for about $220. Next up, we've got an Apple IIc ROM 4 with the works. This is a complete system, all ready to go, looks fantastic. This one's also from Victoria for around $685. Next up, we've got an Apple IIc with a Monitor 2C. Doesn't look like it's got a power supply, and the seller says they're not prepared to turn it on. So its status is currently unknown. This one's in Queensland for around $735. Link down there in the description. Now, about not turning it on. Now, a good friend of the show that does a lot of workshops down at the Mac Museum tells me that the Apple IIc is actually pretty safe to turn on. There's not too many things that can go wrong in it, and even the Monitor 2C is actually pretty safe to turn on. The worst case scenario is maybe a fuse gets blown. However, your mileage might vary. Next up, now we didn't talk about the Apple IIc Plus in the episode today because it's a much newer machine and a bit different to the other 2Cs. However, they're pretty rare in Australia and even rarer to have a 240 volt input. Most of them are 110 volts for the US. But this one must have been modded to take 240 volts because it is labelled that way. And this one's in New South Wales for the princely sum of around $1,410. Not for the faint of heart, but they are pretty rare in Australia. Now, for the more budget-minded, this Apple IIc System Manuals Bundle, Lot 1. This one contains 6 manuals, including the introduction to the Apple IIc and the Apple IIc User's Guide and a few others. This is from Queensland for around $55. Seems like a bargain, because most of the individual manuals go for about half that. And last up, for the very budget-minded and also for those that like collectibles. This is the retro Apple IIc computer playing cards, sealed. So these are a promotional item. They are sealed in box and they are playing cards, as in normal cards that you play games with. But they're all Apple IIc computer themed. So this is available in Victoria for around $10. Link down in the description. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 46 of the Macdownunder Podcast and my look back at the Apple IIc, my second computer that's dear to my heart because I used it to write my honours thesis. Next week, I'm going to talk either about the Apple IIgs, which was the next computer that I purchased, or maybe the Apple II licensed clones that I've got in my collection. If you've got a preference, let me know down in the comments. Love your feedback. So let me know what you thought about today's episode. Again, I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. But until I see you in the next episode, please take care. Thank you for joining the Macdownunder Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.